When I was younger, I believed what the world told me about love, that it would complete me, that somewhere out there was a person who would fix what was broken, fill in all the gaps, and make sense of the chaos I sometimes carried inside. It's a beautiful idea and an incredibly dangerous one, because what happens when you enter a relationship still searching for yourself, hoping someone else will do the work for you? The truth is, no one can give you the version of yourself you're not willing to meet. And when we go into relationships from that place of hoping someone else will patch us up or build us into who we're supposed to be, we start to disappear. We mold ourselves into what we think they want. We dim the light just enough to keep things easy, keep things soft, keep things safe. And before long, we've built a connection not based on truth, but on fear, fear of being too much, too loud, too ambitious, too emotional. And it's hard to come back from that. I say this not as someone who's figured it all out, but as someone who has walked through those patterns and asked herself the hard questions. I've had to sit with the discomfort of realizing I'd let parts of myself go quiet because I thought it would make me easier to love, that I'd internalized the idea that wholeness was something you earned when someone finally said, "Yes, you're enough, but what if you already were?" The irony is, the more we try to be lovable by someone else's standards, the further we get from being truly known. We start editing ourselves, performing smallness in the name of partnership, and in doing so, we betray ourselves softly, quietly, almost invisibly, until one day we wake up and wonder where we went. I've come to believe that real love isn't a puzzle piece completing another. It's two whole people walking side by side, carrying their stories, their flaws, their hopes, without needing the other to fix or finish them. Love, when it's healthy, isn't dependency dressed up as devotion. It's interdependence, respecting each other's autonomy while choosing every day to share space, effort, and presence. And that wholeness, that sense of being rooted in yourself, isn't a destination you reach and stay at forever. It's a practice. Some days you'll feel strong and sovereign, and other days you'll forget. That's human. What matters is that you come back. You remember that your voice is allowed to take up space, that your needs are not a burden, that your dreams are not too big, that the right relationship won't make you choose between love and self. So maybe the most radical act of love is to walk into someone's arms without asking them to carry the weight of making you whole. To say, "I've done the work, I am mine first, and I'm here not to be rescued, but to connect, to share, not to surrender, to love, not to lose myself again." That kind of love is quieter. It doesn't burn as fast, but it burns steadier. It holds room for complexity, for growth, for conflict and return. And perhaps that's where the true magic lives, not in being completed by another, but in learning how to be whole and still open, still willing, still full of hope. There's this idea, quietly passed down through generations, that being a woman means being agreeable, that saying yes makes you lovable and saying no makes you difficult. It begins early the way we're praised for being good girls, the way we learn to apologize even when we've done nothing wrong, the way we're told not to hurt anyone's feelings even when our own are being trampled. And so, we grow up confusing boundaries with rejection. We start believing that to love someone means to give them all of us, even the parts we were meant to keep for ourselves. For a long time, I was scared of disappointing people, scared of saying, "That doesn't feel right," or "I need space," because I thought it would make me seem cold, detached, selfish. But over time, and only through a few hard, honest relationships, I started to understand that boundaries are not a wall that keeps people out. They are the shape of who you are. And if you don't define that shape, someone else will. Boundaries don't push people away. They teach people how to love you in a way that honors you. They say, "This is where I end and you begin." And in that space between us, we can breathe. We can choose each other freely without guilt or pressure. We can trust that love isn't being bought with sacrifice, but offered with intention. Because when you draw a boundary, you're not saying, "I don't care about you." You're saying, "I care about both of us enough to be honest." There's also a misconception that love means losing yourself in someone else, that the more you give, the more valuable the love becomes. But what I've seen in my life, and in the lives of so many women, is that the most enduring love is built on truth. And truth cannot exist where boundaries are not respected. What does it look like in practice? It looks like saying, "I'm not available tonight," without guilt. It looks like expressing a need without apologizing for having one. It looks like leaving a conversation when it turns cruel, even if the person speaking is someone you love. It looks like choosing discomfort over resentment because you've learned that suppressing your truth doesn't protect the relationship, it poisons it. And no, it's not always easy. People won't always like it. Some will call you difficult. Others will punish you with silence or distance. But those responses are not about your boundary. They are about their discomfort with not being in control. And while it might hurt, it's also clarity, because love that punishes honesty is not love that can sustain you. So now, I think of boundaries as the deepest form of self-respect, and by extension, the deepest invitation for real connection. You're saying to the world, "This is what I need to remain whole. If you want to walk with me, here's how we walk together." You're not closing the door, you're keeping the foundation strong. And when love meets you, there sees your line and says, "Yes, I honor it." That's where something real begins. It took me years to learn that saying no could be a way of saying yes, yes to myself, yes to clarity, yes to healthier love. And now I carry those boundaries like quiet armor, not to guard me from connection, but to ensure the connection I do allow in is honest, kind, and rooted in truth. There's a quiet erasure that happens in relationships. It doesn't always arrive in grand betrayals or big fights sometimes. It's just in the moments when you feel the need to edit yourself before you speak, when you hesitate before sharing what you really feel because you're afraid it'll be too much, when you laugh at something that doesn't feel funny or nod along just to avoid being called difficult. It's subtle, almost invisible, but over time it accumulates and you begin to vanish inside your own life. I've lived in that space that's shrinking. I know how easy it is to believe that keeping the peace is more important than telling the truth, that being loved means being agreeable, flexible, quiet. I've done that thing where you leave a conversation feeling heavier, not because anything overtly cruel was said, but because you swallowed something again. You let it pass. You told yourself, "It's not a big deal," but it was. And it is, because the cost of constantly swallowing yourself is that eventually there's nothing left to give that's real. We are taught, especially as women, that silence is safety, that to be easy to love, we must also be easy to manage. But I've learned that true safety doesn't come from hiding. It comes from being seen fully, and that begins when we allow our voice to take up space. It doesn't mean shouting. It doesn't mean dominating. It just means trusting that your thoughts, your feelings, your instincts have value. It means unlearning the reflex to apologize for existing in the room. And it means being okay with the fact that sometimes speaking your truth will make people uncomfortable, even the people you love. What's difficult is that we often tie our worth to how well we're received. And when someone pulls away after we finally speak up, it can feel like confirmation that we were right to stay quiet. But I've come to believe that losing people is not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing is losing yourself in the effort to keep them. In one of my past relationships, I remember a moment so clearly. I disagreed gently, respectfully about something that mattered to me. The air in the room changed. He looked at me differently, like I had disrupted a script. I felt small. I wanted to take it back, but I didn't. And looking back, I'm proud of that version of me, because that's the moment I started coming back to myself. Your voice doesn't just matter, it's essential. It's the thread that connects you to your identity, your boundaries, your power. When you speak, even if it shakes, you are choosing yourself. You are saying, "I believe I am worth listening to." And maybe that's the most important relationship of all, the one you have with your own voice. We don't speak up to control the outcome. We speak up because we've learned that silence is too expensive. We speak up because we're done trading our truth for temporary acceptance, and we speak up because someone, somewhere, needs to hear that it's okay to take up space. So no, don't shrink. Don't soften your edges just to fit into someone else's idea of love. The right love will never require you to disappear. It will invite your full self to the table, voice and all, and when that happens, it won't feel like resistance. It will feel like coming home. There's a kind of love that doesn't feel like love at first. It feels like urgency, like chasing, like trying to be enough. It can even feel romantic, in a tragic kind of way, the way we try to earn love through being more understanding, more patient, more accommodating. It often begins when we believe we're somehow too much and not enough all at once. And then someone comes along who mirrors that belief, who says with their actions or their silence that we'll be worthy if we can just stay small. If we can just stay quiet. I've been there in the kind of relationship that asks you to prove your worth, where affection is conditional, handed out in tiny pieces, and you learn to treat crumbs like a feast. Where you start negotiating with yourself, saying things like, "It's not that bad," or "They didn't mean it that way," even though your body, your heart, is telling you something different. Where you stay not because it feels good, but because you've been convinced you won't find better. Or worse, that you don't deserve better. The truth is, any love that requires you to diminish yourself is not love. It's insecurity in disguise. It's control dressed as commitment. And over time, it erodes the part of you that once believed in softness and safety. You forget what it felt like to be respected without question, to be valued without performance. What's insidious about this kind of love is that it doesn't always hurt loudly. Sometimes it hurts quietly in the way you stop speaking up, the way you second, guess your needs, the way you feel lonelier in the relationship than you ever did outside of it. And when you try to leave, that voice inside you, the one that's been slowly silenced, says, "But what if this is as good as it gets?" That voice doesn't come from truth. It comes from fear. It took me years to understand that I wasn't asking for too much. I was asking the wrong person. The right love never makes you feel like a burden for needing care, kindness, or consistency. It doesn't weaponize your vulnerability or make you work for basic respect. It doesn't leave you feeling like love is something to be earned. It simply sees you and stays. Sometimes we hold on because we're more afraid of being alone than being unloved, but being alone is not the worst thing. The worst thing is teaching yourself to settle, to redefine love so it includes pain, silence, or apology, because once you've convinced yourself that suffering is normal, you start measuring your worth by how much you can endure. But I want to say this to the version of you who's still wondering if you're worth more. You are. You were never too loud, too sensitive, too complicated. You were just in a place that could not hold you. And that is not your failure. Walking away isn't giving up. It's remembering. It's remembering who you were before you believed love had to hurt. It's choosing yourself not as a last resort, but as the very first act of healing. And the day you choose yourself, worth over someone else's comfort, is the day you begin again, not as someone broken, but as someone brave, because love should feel like truth, not performance, like expansion, not shrinking. And if it costs you yourself, worth, it's far too expensive. It took me a long time to realize that people don't treat you the way you deserve, they treat you the way you treat yourself. That's a hard truth, especially if you've been hurt, dismissed, or taken for granted. It can feel like blaming the victim, but it's not about blame. It's about awareness. It's about asking yourself, what have I allowed? What have I taught others to believe about what I'll accept? When you speak to yourself with gentleness, when you honor your own boundaries, when you walk away from what doesn't nourish you that becomes your baseline, it becomes the language you speak fluently and the language you demand from others. Not with ultimatums or threats, but simply through how you live, through the quiet, consistent way you show up for yourself, but that's not the story many of us were raised on. We were taught subtly, persistently, that being loved by others mattered more than loving ourselves. That sacrificing our needs was noble, that being chosen by someone else validated our existence. So we waited, we worked hard to be lovable, to be accepted, to be seen, and in the process we forgot to ask, do I even like the way I'm being treated? Self-love is not a trend. It's not a bubble bath or a lipstick quote. It's deeper. It's painful sometimes. It means holding yourself accountable. It means telling yourself the truth even when it's uncomfortable. It means refusing to abandon yourself just to keep someone else close. I remember times in my life where I bent so far out of shape to keep a relationship intact, I barely recognized myself. I thought if I could just be a little more agreeable, a little more patient, a little more understanding, then maybe I'd finally feel loved in the way I needed to. But the truth was, I wasn't even treating myself the way I wanted to be treated. I was asking someone else to do for me what I hadn't yet learned to do for myself. So I began again slowly, quietly. I started listening to my body when it felt tired or anxious. I said no without explaining why. I stopped over-apologizing. I forgave myself for the ways I'd betrayed my own heart, and something changed, not overnight, but steadily. The people around me began to shift too. Some left, others stayed. But the ones who stayed learned that I wasn't available for a version of love that required me to disappear. It's not about being perfect. It's not about being strong all the time or pretending you don't need anyone. It's about setting a tone for how you want to be held in this world. It's about knowing that your time, your energy, your body, your spirit, they all deserve care, and that care starts with you. So if you find yourself in spaces where you feel unseen, ask, how have I been seeing myself? If your love is constantly conditional, ask, have I made my own love for myself conditional too? You are the standard, you are the mirror, and the moment you begin to love yourself really, actively, deeply, the world starts to reflect that love back to you. Not perfectly, not instantly, but eventually, and when it does, it doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like home. There's a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes explosive, when you realize that staying is no longer healing you. It might come after years of trying, compromising, hoping, or it might arrive suddenly like a jolt to the chest, but it always begins with the same small whisper inside, this isn't who I am anymore. And what follows is terrifying because now you have to choose between the life you've known and the truth you've outgrown. We don't talk enough about how hard it is to leave, not just the physical act of walking away, but the emotional cost of letting go of a story you've invested in. Especially if that story was love, especially if you believed you could fix it or fix them or fix yourself enough to make it work. I've been there in that complicated place where you still love someone, but can no longer survive inside the shape of that love. And I know how easy it is to confuse leaving with failure, because no one teaches us how to leave well. We're taught to hold on, to fight for love, to be loyal. We're told that walking away means giving up, and giving up means you weren't strong enough. But I think the opposite is true. I think leaving when it comes from a place of clarity and self-worth is one of the bravest things a person can do, because it means you've decided that your life matters. Your peace matters, your mental health, your joy, your safety, they matter more than keeping something together just for the sake of appearances. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just waking up and realizing that you don't recognize yourself anymore. That the version of you in the mirror looks tired, smaller, quieter than the one who used to dream big and laugh freely. And that realization, though painful, is a beginning, not an ending. I wish we gave more grace to women who walk away. I wish we didn't ask, why didn't you try harder, but instead asked, what did it cost you to stay? Because staying when you're being erased is not noble. It's survival in slow motion, and we deserve more than survival. When I left a relationship that wasn't right for me, I didn't feel powerful at first. I felt scared. I felt guilty. I felt like I'd failed both of us. but with time and a lot of quiet mornings alone, I realized I had chosen something sacred. I had chosen to come back to myself. And there's nothing selfish about that. There is no medal for staying until you've completely disappeared. There is no prize for enduring unhappiness just to say you never gave up. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is honor the still, small voice inside that says, "This is not where I grow." Leaving doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you started listening. It means you finally heard yourself clearly, maybe for the first time in years, and you chose not to abandon that voice again. So if you're standing on that edge, wondering if walking away means you're weak or broken or failing, I want you to know you're not. You're waking up, you're returning, you're choosing yourself, and that is never a failure. That is freedom.